because I think that most Catholics, most people, when they think of the social teachings and the encyclicals, they associate Rerum Novarum with the first encyclical over 100 years ago. So what's new? It was done in the industrial age when the tension was between capital and labor. Now we have a tension between Facebook, Google, and millions of people. But that is also a new thing. And I think that if the Fondazione is going to ask us to think about new things, about our time, about tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, that is very important. We don't live in the past. We take from the past and we carry on into the future, or at least I think we should. We are in a difficult time, or we are in a grim time, or we are in a time of opportunity. I've had maybe all three, but the third point, opportunity, depends on the leaders, the individuals who step up. I've been in several conversations recently making comparisons between our time, 2018, and the early 1930s. In the early 1930s, with the rise of populism and anger, the collapse of economic success, ethnic tensions led to World War II. With fascism and communism, it led to the death. Well, I don't know how many people the fascists killed. I mean, 6 million Jews, more than that. The Black Book of Communism says that Stalin, Mao, of over 120 million or something. Well, what can we do to step up to make sure that the difficulties and tensions of our time do not lead in that direction? That means opportunity. That means seizing opportunity, not for the bad, but for the good. Or if I may borrow a contemporary idiom, Star Wars. We have to choose the light, not the dark side of the Force. We got to go with the Jedi Knights, not with Darth Vader and the Emperor, right? I've lost my optimism, to be frank, because if the tyrants, if the authoritarians gain control of the digital age, they will use it to control us. You may know the Chinese experiment in a social credit data bank, where they have cameras everywhere and they track all your purchases. They know everything about you. If you behave the way they approve, you will get merit points. It's like it's an old doctrine of works to get you into heaven, right? On the other hand, if you do things that they don't like, you make a slip on Facebook, you buy a product that they disapprove of, you get demerits. And you will, the threats are, your child will be taken out of a privileged school. You will have difficulties on the job. You will have to be interviewed by the police, and that will go into your record. And the big data, the servers, which 10, 15 years ago, people like Google and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg were saying it's going to usher in an era of independence, of individualism, of autonomy, because we can control the discussion. So you go on and the police servers pick you up and now you're a marked person. For how long? As long as the data is in the servers. Big Brother on steroids. George Orwell, literally. I was just reading a piece, I had no idea. I can't remember the name. I was in a business magazine flying over here of an American company, a private company, which was contracted during the War on Terror to develop database on lots and lots of Americans so that algorithms, mathematical equations, could spot you or me as potential terrorists. Well, that's a mathematical thing that could be twisted to spot you or me as having undesirable ideas, as having bad practices, as whatever. As a private company. The scandal that came up in America recently about Facebook, with the election, with this, again, a private company, Cambridge Analytica, which is now gone bankrupt, right? Which then gets into Facebook, pays money, right? There's no moral or ethical screen. They just pay money to Facebook. That gives them access to Facebook's data. Because Facebook's business model is to provide you a free service so that they can sell your private information to me for money. They act as if they care about you because you get to post your friends and do all this sort of, that's just a hook to get you in there. What they really want is your data, which they can sell to me. So Cambridge Analytica goes in and apparently figures out that if you are, let's say, a Trump voter, I think that's what they were trying to do, that everybody with your sort of profile, the magazines you read, the stores you visit, the things you say, then now they have a new set of algorithms where they can go out and they can find 500 people Or maybe they go to your Facebook page and then they go to your 500 friends. Each one of those has 100 friends. Each one of, I mean, you know, this is privacy and individualism being used for the exploitation of those who have money and power. And then it raises the classical issue, going back to Plato, I mean, of political jurisprudence, right? Of jurisprudence is who guards the guardians? Plato said we're going to have highly moral, ethical people be the rulers. The philosopher king. Well, what happens if the philosopher king goes crazy? Or what happens if his philosophy, like Hitler's philosophy, is evil? He's the king. We put him up there. He's got the police. He's got the army. He controls the markets. Try to be a student of our Constitution and the theory, going back to John Locke, of checks and balances. Because I think our framers came to the point that we can't trust anybody with ultimate power. Therefore, we have to have lots of people with smaller amounts of power who presumably can check and offset each other. So that if there's a Facebook here, there's another company over there. But Patrick, if we look at the last couple of years, and I don't get the statistics exactly right, but in America, Facebook and Google between them gobble up 92% of all the advertising dollars on the internet. How are you going to compete? At the same time, in the same period, there's been a decline in venture capital and initial public offerings of new startup companies because the investors, who are smart people, can't see how a little startup is ever going to chip away, compete with those guys. And the other thing that's been going on, which is that if you put something together and you start to grow, they'll buy you. Now they may buy, now that means your owners and your investors, you got a little $5 million company in Google. Well, the staggering amounts of money that Facebook paid for Instagram and Google paid for you, but so you have your $5 million company and they offer you $25 million, you'll sell. It's a huge profit for you and your friends. Once they buy it, they have two choices. They just collapse it, so that technology and that intellectual property never gets used by anybody, or they bring it in and link it into their system where it gives them more market share. Now, Catholic social teachings that the opportunity, the need is not just, let's say, within the world of the faithful, within the church, but it's to reach out and engage Protestants, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Confucians, Japanese Shintoists. And that creates the opportunity and the need to come up with a common standard of what we want, which then can be directed towards political leaders all around the world. So we Americans say to our politicians, the Brits say to their parliament, the Chinese, if they could, would say to the Communist Party, yes, we want digital, we want all this stuff, we need big data, but we need it balanced, we need it checks and balance, we need to apply antitrust, anti-monopoly law, or whatever we're going to do. Or I don't even know if you can have law saying you cannot take privacy, the new attempt by the European Union to use law to protect privacy. Will that work in a digital age, or will the companies just figure out a different way of accessing the data? Right now, I'm cynical. I think they'll hire smart people to figure a way around to get what they want, which is something they can sell. Again, irony, I suppose. It's not working very well. But at the same time, a slightly different topic, it has come up with these 17 Sustainable Development Goals for all countries, all businesses, all people, all administrations, rural, city, county, state, whatever. And these are good goals, they're optimistic, they're constructive, and every government at the United Nations voted for them. Problem is the governments aren't putting up any money to implement them. So on the one hand, this gives us an optimistic point that we can come together around some set of goals. On the other hand, it leads to a sense of disappointment that the bureaucratic mechanisms of the United Nations, the politics of the different nation states, grind away, making everything very slow, very small. The last 2 years, I was just at a meeting with leaders of the Group of 77 in China, and so I encourage them, in all this, but at the same time, I sit back and I say, the last 2 or 3 years as I've gotten to watch the United Nations, a lot of talk. And senior people stand up and read a speech which has been written by a junior person. There's no conviction in the voice of the senior person, the chief of state, the ambassador, the minister of this. And they're just reading it, it has nice words. but there's no heart. There's no heart and soul, no conviction, no faith. Or not. If ideas are important, if human beings really can be moved by ideas and morality and visions and a sense of empathy, then you have to do it. A group like the Fondazione has to do this. If, on the other hand, it's all about selfishness and money and power, and then good faith, goodwill, good ideas. When I first got involved in corporate social responsibility a number of years ago, one of the founders of our group, the co-roundtable with We Have Ethical Principles, was a devout Catholic, Chuck Denny. And this was about 10 years ago, and he's retired, and he's looked back on his career and all this. He said, Steve, I'm tired. For what, 2,000 years, we have the teachings of Jesus Christ. Every Sunday for 2,000 years, people have gone to church. They read the Bible. They know that, all this. And look what they do. So what do? We say, even though we have moral standards, we have ethical standards, we have good ideas, we have Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, et cetera, look what a lot of people do and continue to do. My sense is that it's fundamentally an act of faith and grace, and it is up to us to believe that we can make a difference for good. And we have to create opportunities like the Fondazione to encourage others, to give them, if you will, the raw materials. Here are the ideas. Here's the facts. Here's the argument. Now it's up to you to go out and talk to your board of directors, talk to your politicians, write commentaries for the Financial Times in the UK or the New York Times in my country.